The night was supposed to be uneventful, a routine patrol just like any other. Officer Greg Harper adjusted his belt as he leaned against his cruiser, the neon lights from a nearby diner reflecting off the polished hood. His shift was nearly over, and all he wanted was a strong cup of coffee before heading home. But then, everything changed. A sleek black car pulled into the parking lot, rolling to a smooth stop in front of the diner. Harper barely glanced at it until the driver stepped out. The man had an air of authority about him, dressed in a sharp suit, his movements confident, deliberate. But it was the look in his eyes that caught Harper's attention, an unmistakable expression of someone used to being in control. Harper straightened, his instincts kicking in. Something about the way the man carried himself didn't sit right. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't cautious. He was **2*** sure of himself. Then he saw it. The car had no plates. His grip on his radio tightened. No plates on a vehicle like that. It didn't add up. He took a step forward, his voice firm but calm. "Sir, can you step away from the vehicle?" The man turned, raising an eyebrow as if surprised anyone would dare to question him. "Excuse me." Harper kept his stance steady. "Your car doesn't have plates. I need to see your license and registration." The man sighed, shaking his head with an almost amused expression. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Harper didn't blink. "Doesn't change the fact that you're driving an unregistered vehicle." A flicker of something crossed the man's face. Annoyance, maybe. He reached into his pocket, moving slowly, deliberately. "I don't have time for this nonsense." He pulled out a sleek leather wallet, flipping it open to reveal a badge. The words hit Harper like a slap to the face. United States Attorney General ***. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. Harper stared at the badge, his pulse hammering in his ears. The Attorney General, the highest law enforcement officer in the country. The man smirked, clearly enjoying the reaction. Now he said smoothly, "Are we done here?" Harper swallowed, his mind racing. This was dangerous territory. A wrong move here could cost him everything. But the law was the law. Badge or not, this man was breaking it. "You still need to provide your vehicle's registration," Harper said, his voice carefully controlled. The Attorney General's smirk faded, his gaze hardened. "I don't think you understand, officer. I don't answer to small-town cops." Harper's jaw clenched. He knew exactly what was happening. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about ***power***. A slow tension spread through the air, thick and suffocating. The Attorney General took a step closer, his voice lowering. "Do yourself a favor. Walk away." Harper's fingers twitched near his holster, not because he was afraid, but because something about this didn't feel right. Why would the Attorney General, the Attorney General, be out here in the middle of the night in an unmarked, unregistered car? A sinking feeling settled in his gut. "Sir, I need you to step away from the vehicle." The Attorney General laughed under his breath, shaking his head like Harper was some kind of fool. "You don't know what you're getting yourself into, officer." Then he reached for the car door. Harper's instincts screamed at him. "Hands where I can see them." The Attorney General froze. The smirk was gone. In its place was something much colder. "You really want to do this?" Harper's pulse pounded, his training kicking in. "I won't ask again." For a long moment, neither of them moved. The night stretched between them, thick with something unspoken. The weight of power, of authority, of the ***line between them. Then, flashing red and blue lights cut through the darkness. Another squad car pulled into the lot, tires screeching to a halt. And just like that, everything changed. Because the moment those doors opened, the real truth behind this night started unraveling. And neither Harper nor the Attorney General was prepared for what was coming next. The flashing red and blue lights reflected off the Attorney General's sleek black car, painting streaks of color across the polished surface. Harper's grip on his holster remained firm as the doors of the second squad car swung open. 2 officers stepped out, moving with purpose. Harper immediately recognized one of them, Lieutenant Mark Reynolds, his superior. Reynolds' sharp eyes darted between Harper and the man in the suit. His expression darkened when he saw the badge still held between the Attorney General's fingers. "Harper," Reynolds said, his voice low but firm, "what's going on here?" Harper didn't take his eyes off the Attorney General. Pulled in with no plates. Refused to provide registration. Reynolds exhaled, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. His gaze flicked to the Attorney General. "Sir, is there a reason you're driving an unregistered vehicle?" The Attorney General's demeanor didn't change. If anything, he looked more annoyed than before. "Is this how you train your officers? To harass federal officials on a power trip?" Reynolds' expression remained unreadable, but Harper could see the shift in his stance, rigid, careful. He was treading lightly. "Sir," Reynolds said, measured, "we have protocols. The lack of plates is a red flag. You understand why my officer had to investigate." The Attorney General let out a slow, humorless chuckle. "I don't think you understand, Lieutenant. There's a reason this car doesn't have plates." He snapped his wallet shut and slid it back into his pocket. "This vehicle belongs to the Department of Justice. It operates under federal jurisdiction. That means neither of you," he glanced between Harper and Reynolds, "have any business questioning me about it." Harper's jaw tightened. Something wasn't adding up. He'd been a cop long enough to know that federal vehicles, especially those tied to high-ranking officials, weren't just casually driven around without proper identification. If this was a government vehicle, it should have been registered under law enforcement exemptions. Yet there was nothing. No markings, no identification. Just a sleek black car with ***, no traceable origin ***. Reynolds hesitated for a moment before stepping forward, his voice calm. "Sir, with all due respect, even a federal vehicle should have some form of identification. If you can provide paperwork, we'll clear this up right now." For the first time, the Attorney General's carefully maintained composure cracked. A flicker of something, was it frustration? Or something deeper, flashed across his face before he exhaled sharply. "I don't have time for this," he muttered, turning back toward the driver's side door. Harper instinctively stepped closer. "Sir, don't move until this is settled." The Attorney General froze, one hand resting on the door handle. The air between them thickened. Reynolds turned to Harper, his voice barely above a whisper. "Harper, stand down." Harper clenched his jaw, but he didn't move. Something was wrong. He could feel it in his gut. The Attorney General straightened, adjusting his suit jacket. His expression was unreadable, but there was something almost calculated about the way he studied them now. "You're making a mistake," he said quietly. "I'd advise you to reconsider how far you're willing to push this." Harper's pulse quickened. There was something in the way he said it, like it wasn't a warning, but promise. A silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant hum of passing traffic. Then, before Harper or Reynolds could say anything else, a voice crackled over the police radio. "All units, we have a situation unfolding at the East Side Bridge. Possible federal involvement, requesting immediate assistance." Reynolds reached for his radio, responding quickly. "Dispatch, confirm federal involvement. Who's on scene?" A pause. Then, "FBI agents are securing the area. Officers are being asked to keep their distance until further notice." Harper frowned, glancing at the Attorney General, who remained stone-faced. Reynolds exhaled, then turned back to him. "We're done here, Harper." Harper tensed. "Sir." "That's an order." Harper hesitated, his guts screaming at him to not let this go. But Reynolds' expression made it clear. This was bigger than them now. Without another word, Reynolds stepped back, motioning for the other officer to return to the squad car. Harper took a slow breath before finally lowering his hand from his holster. The Attorney General's lips curved slightly, an almost imperceptible smirk, before he opened the car door and slid inside. Harper watched as the sleek black car backed out of the lot, its tires rolling smoothly onto the road before vanishing into the night. No plates, no trail. And just like that, he was gone. Harper exhaled sharply, his thoughts racing. Something was wrong. And whatever was happening at that bridge, it wasn't a coincidence. He could feel it. Harper sat in his patrol car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The Attorney General's car had disappeared into the night, but the unease in his gut remained. He glanced at Reynolds, who sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched. Neither of them spoke for a long moment, but the weight of the situation hung between them like a thick fog. "Something's off," Harper finally said, his voice low. Reynolds exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "Of course something's off. But this is above our pay grade. You saw what happened back there." Harper shook his head. "I don't like it. No plates, no registration, and the guy acts like we should just ignore it. That wasn't just arrogance. He was hiding something." Reynolds turned his head slowly, his eyes sharp. "You think I don't know that?" His voice was quiet but firm. "You think I don't feel it too?" He leaned back, staring at the roof of the car. "But you heard dispatch. FBI's involved. They don't want us near that bridge. You push this, Harper, and you might end up in a situation you can't walk away from." Harper tapped his fingers against the wheel, his thoughts racing. Then why was he out here alone? If this was some classified operation, why wouldn't he have protection? Why wouldn't his car at least be marked as a government vehicle? Reynolds let out a slow breath. "You want my honest opinion?" Harper nodded. "I think we just stumbled onto something we were never supposed to see." The words settled between them, heavy and unsettling. The radio crackled again, but this time it was local chatter. Nothing about the bridge. Nothing about the Attorney General. Harper reached for the ignition, but before he could start the car, a black SUV rolled past them on the street. The windows were tinted, and the vehicle moved slowly, deliberately. Harper's instincts flared again. "You see that?" he muttered. Reynolds followed his gaze and nodded. "Yeah, I see it." The SUV disappeared around the corner, and Harper wasted no time pulling out onto the road. He wasn't about to let another mystery vehicle slip away into the night. Reynolds sighed. "You really want to do this?" Harper didn't answer. He just followed. The SUV kept a steady pace, never speeding, never hesitating at intersections. It was the kind of driving that screamed experience. Whoever was inside wasn't just another civilian. They were trained. Harper kept a careful distance, not wanting to spook them, but the knot in his stomach tightened with every block they passed. Then, just as they reached an abandoned industrial area on the outskirts of town, the SUV suddenly veered into a narrow alley. Harper's heart pounded as he slowed the cruiser. "Trap," Reynolds muttered. Harper swallowed hard. "Maybe, but we're already here." They turned into the alley cautiously, headlights cutting through the darkness. The SUV had stopped at the far end, engine idling. Harper put the car in park, but didn't step out. Neither did Reynolds. They waited. Seconds stretched into what felt like hours. Then, the driver's side door of the SUV opened. A man stepped out, dressed in a dark suit, his movements careful but controlled. He wasn't the Attorney General, but something about him was just as unsettling. He stood beside the vehicle, his hands visible, but his posture spoke volumes. This wasn't a man who was caught off guard. This was a man waiting for them. Harper exchanged a look with Reynolds. "We getting out?" Reynolds let out a slow breath. "Guess we don't have a choice." They both stepped out, keeping their hands near their holsters, but not drawing their weapons. The man didn't move, didn't flinch. Harper took the lead, You lost. The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying them. That depends. His voice was calm, almost too calm. Are you looking for something? Harper held his ground. That depends too. Who are you? A small smile tugged at the corner of the man's mouth, but there was no warmth in it. Just someone who thinks you're asking too many questions. Reynolds tensed beside him. That's supposed to be a threat. The man shook his head. No, it's advice. He glanced toward the street behind them. Turn around. Go back to your normal patrol. Forget tonight ever happened. Harper felt a cold chill creep down his spine. You work for the Attorney General. The man's smile widened just a fraction. I work for people who don't like complications. Harper's fingers twitched. That sounds like a threat. The man's eyes darkened. It's a warning. For a long moment, nobody moved. The air in the alley was heavy, thick with tension. Then, without another word, the man turned and climbed back into the SUV. The engine rumbled, and just like that, the vehicle backed out and disappeared into the night. Harper let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Reynolds shook his head. This is bad, Reynolds muttered. Harper nodded. Yeah, it is. Neither of them said anything for a moment. The city stretched around them, quiet but alive with secrets. Harper knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Harper barely slept that night. His mind kept replaying the confrontation in the alley, the cold warning from the man in the SUV. There was something much bigger at play here, something that went far beyond an unregistered car or a traffic stop gone wrong. Every instinct in his body told him to back off, to let this go. But the problem was, he couldn't. Not after what he'd seen. Not after the way the Attorney General had reacted. By morning, the story of the traffic stop had already spread through the department. No official reprimand had come down yet, but Harper could feel the tension in the air. His captain had barely spoken to him, and a few officers he'd worked with for years now avoided his gaze. The message was clear. Asterisk, asterisk, don't push this asterisk, asterisk. Reynolds caught up with him in the parking lot before their next shift, his expression tense. I got a bad feeling about today. Harper sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. That makes two of us. You see the news? Reynolds asked. Harper shook his head. They're saying the Attorney General was never in this city last night. Official reports place him in D.C. the whole time. Harper's stomach tightened. That's a lie. Reynolds nodded. I know, but someone's covering for him. And if they're going this far to erase what happened, we're already in too deep. Harper knew Reynolds was right, but the part that scared him the most, they still didn't know asterisk asterisk why asterisk asterisk the Attorney General had been here. What had he been doing out on that bridge in an unmarked car alone? And more importantly, what had they almost stumbled into? Their first call of the day came in just after noon. A disturbance at a downtown office building. Nothing unusual, but the moment they arrived, Harper's gut told him something wasn't right. The building was too quiet, the air inside heavy. A security guard met them at the entrance, his face pale. You need to see this, he said, his voice shaking. Harper and Reynolds followed him to the elevators. The guard hit the button for the basement level without a word. As the doors closed, Harper felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. The elevator doors opened to a dimly lit corridor. The guard led them down the hall, stopping outside a door marked asterisk asterisk maintenance asterisk asterisk. He hesitated, then slowly pushed it open. Harper stepped inside and froze. The room was small, lined with shelves stacked with cleaning supplies and tools. But in the center, shoved up against the back wall, was something that didn't belong. A briefcase. Sleek, black, expensive-looking, and slightly open. Reynolds moved first, kneeling beside it. Harper, he murmured, his voice tight. Harper stepped closer. Inside the briefcase were classified government files, dozens of them, stamped with official seals, some marked asterisk asterisk top secret asterisk asterisk. Some pages had been pulled out, scattered across the floor. But it was the name on the first document that made Harper's blood run cold. Asterisk asterisk Attorney General David Lawson asterisk asterisk. Harper's mind raced. What were these files doing here? Who left them? Before he could form a plan, the security guard shifted nervously. Someone else was down here earlier. A man in a suit. He looked around, then left in a hurry. Harper exchanged a glance with Reynolds. Did you see his face? The guard hesitated. Not clearly, but he was tall, older, and he seemed agitated. Harper didn't like this. None of it made sense. But one thing was clear. Someone had left these files here asterisk asterisk on purpose asterisk asterisk. Reynolds stood up, pulling out his phone. We need to call this in. Before Harper could respond, the lights in the room flickered. Then, a loud asterisk asterisk bang asterisk asterisk echoed from upstairs. Gunfire. Harper's heart slammed into his ribs. Stay here. He ordered the guard, then sprinted back toward the elevator with Reynolds at his side. They emerged onto the main floor just as more gunshots rang out. The sound was coming from outside, near the parking lot. Harper and Reynolds drew their weapons, moving fast. Then they saw him. The man from the SUV. He was standing beside a black car, talking to someone in the driver's seat. But the moment he spotted Harper and Reynolds, his expression darkened. Then, he reached inside his coat. Harper reacted instantly. Freeze. The man ignored the warning. His hand moved fast, too fast. Reynolds fired first, a single shot. The bullet struck the ground near the man's feet, stopping him in his tracks. But the car door flew open, and another figure stepped out. Harper's breath caught. It was asterisk asterisk, the Attorney General asterisk asterisk. Only this time, he wasn't alone. 4 more men stepped out of the car, all dressed in dark suits, their hands hovering near their waistbands. The tension crackled like static electricity. Then the Attorney General smiled, a slow, knowing smile. I told you to walk away, officer. Harper's grip tightened on his weapon. His pulse roared in his ears. Everything was about to explode. Harper didn't move. His weapon was steady, his breathing controlled, but his mind was spinning. The Attorney General wasn't just here, he was expecting this. The way he stood, the way the men behind him positioned themselves, it was all calculated, controlled. The situation had just escalated into something far beyond a routine investigation. The parking lot was too quiet. Reynolds took half a step closer to Harper, his voice barely above a whisper. We're outnumbered. Harper knew that, but he also knew they couldn't back down. Not now. The briefcase in the basement, the lies in the media, the cover-ups, everything pointed to something massive. And whatever was inside those classified files, it was worth enough for the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country to show up in person. The Attorney General's smirk deepened as if he could read Harper's thoughts. You really don't know what you stepped into, do you? His voice was calm, almost amused. I gave you a chance, officer. I told you to walk away. Harper held his ground. I don't walk away when the law is being broken. A flicker of something, approval, maybe, crossed the Attorney General's face. That's what I thought. He gave a slight nod, and in an instant, one of his men reached inside the car, pulling out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the ground between them. Since you're so determined, why don't you take a look at what you're really dealing with? Harper didn't move. Neither did Reynolds. The envelope sat there, the edges fluttering slightly in the night breeze. It felt like a trap. It asterisk asterisk was asterisk asterisk a trap, but they couldn't ignore it. Go on, the Attorney General urged. Take it. Harper made a quick decision. He motioned for Reynolds to cover him, then slowly crouched down, never taking his eyes off the men in front of him. He reached for the envelope, fingers brushing against the thick paper. Then, with one swift motion, he flipped it open. His stomach clenched. Inside were photos photos of him, of Reynolds, of their families, their homes, their daily routines. Someone had been watching them. For weeks, maybe longer. Harper swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he couldn't show weakness. That was what they wanted. Reynolds shifted beside him, his grip tightening on his gun. "You've been following us?" His voice was low, edged with controlled fury. The Attorney General tilted his head. "I do my research, officer. You see, you and your partner here have been digging into things that don't concern you." He took a slow step forward, his expression unreadable. "And that's a problem." Harper clenched his jaw. "What's in those files downstairs?" The Attorney General's smirk returned. "You already know the answer to that, but let's just say, they weren't supposed to be found." Harper glanced at Reynolds, who gave a barely perceptible nod. They were in too deep now. There was no turning back. The Attorney General sighed, as if disappointed. "I really did try to warn you." He motioned to his men. "But I'm afraid we've reached the end of the road." The tension snapped. One of the men lunged. Harper barely had time to react. He twisted to the side, yanking Reynolds down with him just as a gunshot rang out. The bullet missed, slamming into a parked car behind them. Chaos erupted in the lot, shouting, scrambling, the metallic clatter of weapons being drawn. Harper hit the ground, rolling behind a nearby car for cover. Reynolds was beside him, already returning fire. The Attorney General's men moved fast, using the vehicles as shields, firing in controlled bursts. They weren't just hired muscle, they were trained, professional. Harper's mind raced. They couldn't win this fight, not like this. They were outnumbered, outgunned. The only way to survive was to get out. Reynolds ducked as another bullet shattered a window above them. "We need an exit." Harper's eyes scanned the lot, searching for an opening. Then he saw it, an alleyway just beyond the rows of cars. If they could make it there, they'd have a chance. "Cover me," Harper shouted. Reynolds didn't hesitate. He fired off 3 rapid shots, forcing their attackers to duck. Harper sprang into action, sprinting low toward the alley. Behind him, he heard the Attorney General's voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't let them leave." More gunfire, more shouts. Harper pushed forward, his heart hammering. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about exposing the truth Harper pushed forward, his feet pounding against the pavement as he sprinted toward the alley. The gunfire behind him was relentless, echoing through the parking lot. Reynolds was right behind him, moving fast, staying low. They had seconds, maybe less, before the Attorney General's men closed in. Just as they reached the alley's entrance, Harper saw headlights cutting through the darkness. A black SUV skidded to a stop at the far end, blocking their escape. The doors swung open, and more men spilled out, weapons drawn. They were trapped. Harper and Reynolds pressed themselves against the brick wall, their minds racing. The only way out was through. But even if they fought their way past the men in front of them, they still had the ones behind them closing in fast. Then Harper saw it. A fire escape. Rusted, barely holding together, but reachable. He grabbed Reynolds' arm and pointed up. "That's our way out." Reynolds didn't hesitate. He jumped, grabbing hold of the lowest rung and pulling himself up. Harper was right behind him, but before he could climb, a gunshot rang out. Pain exploded in his shoulder. Harper gritted his teeth, his fingers slipping for half a second before he forced himself to hold on. He couldn't stop. Not now. More gunfire. Sparks flew as bullets hit the metal railing, missing him by inches. Reynolds grabbed his arm, hauling him up the rest of the way. They scrambled onto the rooftop, breathing hard. Below, the Attorney General's men were already moving, shouting orders into their radios. Harper forced himself to push through the pain. He pressed a hand against his shoulder, feeling the warm, sticky blood seeping through his shirt. But there was no time to worry about that. Harper's heart slammed into his ribs. "Stay here," he ordered the guard, then sprinted back toward the elevator with Reynolds at his side. They emerged onto the main floor just as more gunshots rang out. The sound was coming from outside, near the parking lot. Harper and Reynolds drew their weapons, moving fast. Then they saw him. The man from the SUV. He was standing beside a black car, talking to someone in the driver's seat. But the moment he spotted Harper and Reynolds, his expression darkened. Then, he reached inside his coat. Harper reacted instantly. "Freeze." The man ignored the warning. His hand moved fast, too fast. Reynolds fired first, a single shot. The bullet struck the ground near the man's feet, stopping him in his tracks. But the car door flew open, and another figure stepped out. Harper's breath caught. It was the Attorney General ***. Only this time, he wasn't alone. 4 more men stepped out of the car, all dressed in dark suits, their hands hovering near their waistbands. The tension crackled like static electricity. Then the Attorney General smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "I told you to walk away, officer." Harper's grip tightened on his weapon. His pulse roared in his ears. Everything was about to explode. Harper didn't move. His weapon was steady, his breathing controlled, but his mind was spinning. The Attorney General wasn't just here, he was expecting this. The way he stood, the way the men behind him positioned themselves, it was all calculated, controlled. The situation had just escalated into something far beyond a routine investigation. The parking lot was too quiet. Reynolds took half a step closer to Harper, his voice barely above a whisper. "We're outnumbered." Harper knew that, but he also knew they couldn't back down. Not now. The briefcase in the basement, the lies in the media, the cover-ups, everything pointed to something massive. And whatever was inside those classified files, it was worth enough for the most powerful law enforcement officer in the country to show up in person. The Attorney General's smirk deepened as if he could read Harper's thoughts. "You really don't know what you stepped into, do you?" His voice was calm, almost amused. "I gave you a chance, officer. I told you to walk away." Harper held his ground. "I don't walk away when the law is being broken." A flicker of something, approval, maybe, crossed the Attorney General's face. "That's what I thought." He gave a slight nod, and in an instant, one of his men reached inside the car, pulling out a thick manila envelope. He tossed it onto the ground between them. "Since you're so determined, why don't you take a look at what you're really dealing with?" Harper didn't move. Neither did Reynolds. The envelope sat there, the edges fluttering slightly in the night breeze. It felt like a trap. It was a trap, but they couldn't ignore it. "Go on," the Attorney General urged. "Take it." Harper made a quick decision. He motioned for Reynolds to cover him, then slowly crouched down, never taking his eyes off the men in front of him. He reached for the envelope, fingers brushing against the thick paper. Then, with one swift motion, he flipped it open. His stomach clenched. Inside were photos, photos of him, of Reynolds, of their families, their homes, their daily routines. Someone had been watching them. For weeks, maybe longer. Harper swallowed hard, forcing himself to stay calm. His pulse pounded in his ears, but he couldn't show weakness. That was what they wanted. Harper exhaled, feeling the weight of it all settle in. He had spent years on the force, dealing with criminals, liars, and people who thought they were above the law. But this was different. This wasn't some small-time crook. This was the highest-ranking law enforcement officer in the country, a man who had controlled the system, who had bent the rules for his own gain. And yet, here he was, caught, exposed, powerless. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. "You really don't know how to take the easy way, do you?" Harper looked up to see Agent Collins stepping toward him, hands in his pockets. He was the one Harper had sent the evidence to, the one who had brought in the feds just in time. Harper let out a tired chuckle. Guess not. Collins smirked, then his expression grew more serious. You did the right thing. This guy, he had too many people scared to go against him, but you didn't back down. Harper shrugged, wincing at the motion. Just did my job. Collins shook his head. No, you did more than that. You put everything on the line, and you exposed the truth. He glanced toward the Attorney General's car as it pulled away. A lot of powerful people are going to have to answer for what happened here tonight. Harper nodded, but he wasn't naive. Bringing down one corrupt official didn't mean the system was suddenly clean. There were always more like him, people who used power for themselves instead of for justice. But this was a start. Reynolds sat down beside him, letting out a long sigh. You know, I was looking forward to a quiet shift tonight. Harper smirked. Yeah, how'd that work out for you? Reynolds let out a dry laugh. Oh, just great. Chased, shot at, almost thrown off a rooftop. Standard Tuesday night, really. Harper shook his head, staring down at his hands. The adrenaline was wearing off, and exhaustion was settling in fast. But there was something else too, something deeper. Think it'll stick? Harper asked. You think he'll actually face justice? Reynolds was quiet for a moment before he spoke. I think we gave him a fight he wasn't expecting. And I think, for once, the right people are paying attention. He nudged Harper's arm. And if not, well, we know where to find him. Harper smirked. You planning on making a habit of going after corrupt officials now? Reynolds shrugged. Hey, could be fun. Keeps things interesting. Collins took a step closer. For what it's worth, this case isn't disappearing. Too many eyes are on it now. The evidence is solid, the charges are real. He's not walking away from this. Harper nodded, letting the words settle in. He wanted to believe it. He had to believe it. A few hours later, after giving statements and having his wound properly treated, Harper finally walked out of the precinct. The night air was cool against his skin, and for the first time in what felt like hours, the city felt quiet. Reynolds fell into step beside him. So, what now? Harper let out a slow breath. I think I go home, get some sleep, and tomorrow. He glanced up at the sky, at the faint hint of dawn on the horizon. Tomorrow, we keep doing the job. Reynolds nodded. Sounds like a plan. They stood there for a moment, letting the night settle around them. The city kept moving, kept breathing. It always did. No matter how much corruption tried to bury the truth, no matter how much power tried to silence those who stood against it, justice always had a way of finding the light. Harper wasn't sure what came next. Maybe there would be more battles, more nights like this one. But for now, he had done what he set out to do, and that was enough. With one last look at the city, he turned and walked away, knowing that no matter what came next, he would be ready.